Greetings, gamers and horror fans. I wanted to take some time on the normal date and hour that I usually live stream to address the news that dropped last Friday and voice my impression therein. So, if you already know, that's probably why you saw the thumbnail and you read the title and you clicked on this video. If you don't know, I'll clarify momentarily. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to give some context over not just the reveal that recently befell this campaign, but my past regarding the gaming genre of survival horror. So, last summer, I reviewed the Resident Evil Netflix miniseries. I know, don't tune out, I'm going somewhere with this. I mentioned the luxury that the REIP enjoys over its brethren horror series. The unlikelihood that we'd see revivals of the likes of Dino Crisis, your Parasite Eves, your Alone in the Darks. Lo and behold, mere weeks after making that bold statement, the news had leaked. 30 years after the release of the original game, THQ Nordic was now working on a remake of Alone in the Dark. The rumors were later confirmed when, at a publisher showcase, we got our first look at the game's trailer. Folks, I could not have been happier to be dead wrong. I even immediately took to my channel, admitting my error with the enthusiasm of a fanboy. Alone in the Dark, the granddaddy of survival horror, was back. Which brings me to American McGee's Wonderland series. So, I keep an active list of scary games that I want to play for my live streams. You gotta understand, survival horror is one massive beast to tackle, with a lengthy 40-plus year library and legacy. I had shortlisted both American McGee Alice games since I started broadcasting my Let's Plays almost 2 years ago. And to me, and I'm sure anyone else would agree, as far as survival horror, and to be honest, gaming in general goes, these two were absolute musts. And I couldn't have pulled this off. I couldn't have kept going without acknowledging these games, without adding it to my library. It just, they had to be part of the Scream stream. So, as much as the sequel, Madness Returns, was a highly anticipated playthrough from the beginning, it was as far back as Halloween 2022 when I played Clive Barker's Jericho all month long, all October, that I had finally hammered down a schedule for when to play the Alice sequel, and that it would be slated for April 2023 to celebrate the Easter holiday. So, for me, it was perfect timing that just before my Madness Returns Scream stream, the trailer dropped, the news released on Valentine's Day 2023 for a crowd-funded Alice Asylum, a third game in the franchise to round out the series with a trilogy. To me, I mean, what a perfect love letter to the fans. Just perfect timing. You genuinely couldn't have asked for a better surprise like that. And for me, especially considering the aforementioned timing of my Scream stream that I'd be participating in. And right from the jump, the news just flooded in. American McGee back for round 3. The designer has himself a new creative team. The project will be funded by fan support. Here's one for the good guys, right? He'd done live streams discussing the design. They'd even drafted a design Bible. This thing is 414 pages. A man's artistic vision, from art style to costumes, levels, enemy variety, boss types, plot, were laid out in a near 500-page PDF. They even released a trailer hyping the new game and referencing the design Bible. The timing couldn't be better. I genuinely felt a sense of enablement, let's call it. I read American McGee's words, and I felt emboldened by his mission statement. Quote, in the design Bible, McGee himself stated the following: share and talk about this document online. In order to thrive and get the attention this project deserves, we want the fans of Alice to voice their support for the project. Share this document online. Link to it. Tell friends. Review the design Bible on your live streams. Please join us in making positive noise for Alice Asylum, where you can in the online space. Now, I had been planning for a horror event in April, a month full of anniversaries, narrations, watch parties, and live streams. Though Alice Madness Returns was part of it, with the disclosure that an American McGee sequel was in the works, I opted to make the second game, now the central chapter in the Wonderland series, the centerpiece of the Easter Feaster horror event. As the designer stated, I was going to mention his project at every live stream I made, each video I edited. I'd replace my support links with URLs for the McGee Patreon. Even substitute my normal outros of Mind's Eye and Mind Games content with a specially designed end credit scene referencing all things Alice Asylum. Now look, it's important to temper expectations with a dose of reality. My channel is microscopic in the grand scheme of things, to the point that I am utterly dwarfed by the likes of platforms such as Residents of Evil, Super Horror Bro, and AVP Galaxy. But selfishly, a sense of gratification in spreading the word befell me. Spotlighting the push to get people talking about this and playing my part, small as it is, to donate to this, pardon the pun, wondrous effort. Not to humble brag, but it felt great to be part of a campaign that could help raise awareness to a grassroots venture to breathe an endeavor to life. Just last month, I received my In Search of Darkness Part 3 documentary of 80s horror, and I'll speak on behalf of horror fans here. I can talk about how great and fulfilling it is to contribute to these crowd-funded projects that celebrate the genre. Now, the thought that we could have been playing not just an innovative and imaginative game on its own merits with Alice Asylum, not just the final chapter in a trilogy that would have brought closure to its creator, but it would have been fan driven, and to me that's incredible. That would have been surreal to experience that, knowing that you would have devoted to someone else's devotion. And quite literally hold in the palm of your hands one man's dream brought to fruition. But alas, this past Friday, I was gearing up for my Critters 2 watch party when I first noticed the breaking news item on Reddit. EA rejects proposal for a third Alice game. The Asylum has been shut down. So, instead of one more trek down the rabbit hole, EA opted to flush the project down the drain. And just like that, it was over. All the excitement, all the expectation, that's it. All the hard work and the investment just dissipated. If I could take a step back for a moment, For me, this all started 7 years ago before even my channel had started. Now, we had gotten a revival of another long since dead franchise that had been long rumored for a revival. However, the general consensus was, even if they make another Doom game, it'll just be that. Just another game. It's just another game in the entry. But nowhere near the game changer that was the first or second game. And then we got Doom 2016. I mean, what a tour de force that one was. And best of all, that wasn't it. Oh no. 3 years after, we got RE2 in 2019. A reminder, not just of that franchise and how great it can be, how it can once more, and forgive me if this sounds corny, but once more reach for that brass ring. Just reclaim its mantle, its title at the top of survival horror. Remind us of what this genre used to be. To me, that was, I couldn't believe it. And considering you have to remember what the Resident Evil franchise had dwindled down to with their obsession with trying to be the next Call of Duty, or lure Call of Duty fans away from that game, which was a failed endeavor, by trying to appease action fans, and basically forgetting what Resident Evil was all about, and forgetting that it in of itself was a game changer. I mean, once upon a time, that franchise was a system seller. And then, just 1 year after that, in 2020, we got the follow-up to disprove any fluke. What am I referring to? Oh, a little game called Doom Eternal. It was incredible to see the unthinkable literally play out. You had these two, not just two franchises, but you have to understand, Doom and Resident Evil were there from the beginning. They both debuted in the 90s, and yes, Doom does obviously sway much more in the action genre than it does in horror, but there are obviously horror elements to it. And again, these it was just evaluated. It was just genuinely considered that the consensus was these franchises are down for the count. They may come out with games, they'll never have a comeback. Big difference. So the fact that these three games in two franchises were able to turn that series around was genuinely incredible. Now I retain a soft spot for the 7th gen of consoles, especially when it comes to their horror offerings, but it's no secret that it's widely considered that it was in that generation of console gaming where survival horror took a bit of a downturn. So once again, to see that it was possible for these to not only make a comeback, but for there to be some level of consistency. You know what I mean? It's one thing if there is a good movie or a good film. I reference 2017's It Chapter 1. Whew, boy. That was a fluke in terms of Stephen King adaptations, because right after that, we got The Dark Tower and It Chapter 2 and Pet Sematary. Ugh. So, the fact that we had 3 games was it seemed to be not only providing consistency, but I don't want to say a formula to follow, more of a promise for other games to follow suit. And I mean, I can't be the only one that was just sitting back in anticipation, like, oh my god, you have to believe that other studios, other developers, other designers are taking notice that, wow, these games aren't just, successes. They are galvanizing their own franchises and their own fans that had probably begun to lose faith in these franchises. So afterwards, like a cut phone call, the line seemingly went dead. No one seemed to be capitalizing on the promise of these revivals. I was genuinely puzzled, as were many as was the greater survival horror fan base. I myself became so restless that by the time I started YouTubing, my 21st episode, which I reference often, it's titled Survival Horror Remorse, I started asking the tough questions of, where is the resurgence of Silent Hill? And where is the return of Alone in the Dark? And where the hell is the acknowledgement of an unserved appetite of an untapped market in the wake of Resident Evil 2 Remake? Like, this should have been a wake-up call. Why is nobody talking about these? Sure, the fans are, and the fans were wondering, okay, what's next? What are they gonna bring on next? What else do we get to see? But it was nothing. It was a weird time because we were celebrating. We as fans were ecstatic. We were happy that these games had come out. We were happy that these franchises were experiencing a comeback. And nothing? Like, there's no follow-up, there's no discussions. It was basically radio silence after what was it? After Doom Eternal. It was the strangest thing. It's like, hey guys, this ain't a fluke. Like, get on this already. So on the one hand, people are rejoicing and celebrating and they're happy, and on the other hand, it's like, hey, shouldn't you studios who don't usually, or you're not usually gun shy about capitalizing on any kind of trend or what have you, why is it that the fans are the only ones discussing this? So I don't know. Maybe it was due in part to the pinko pox of 2020, or maybe it took game devs and publishers too long to notice, galvanize, and brainstorm how to exploit the success of what Doom and Resident Evil were enjoying with their own classic scary games. But gradually, bulletins began to drip feed their own announcements of the return of past survival horror titles. Eyes to the horizon of everything down the pipeline. System Shock Remake. Alan Wake 2. The return of Stalker with its sequel. Fatal Frame 4, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, coming to current gen after Fatal Frame 5, Maiden of Blackwater, released a year and a half ago. And Silent Hill. This was the big one. Not just the return of the definitive survival horror title, but, dude, an entire plethora of Silent Hill games. And a sequel to the film. If Silent Hill is the definitive survival horror game in my book, I will absolutely, definitively, and emphatically state here and now that the Silent Hill movie is the definitive video game adaptation. No offense, Sonic, and it's-a me, Mario. Guys, take stock over the list of games that were on the comeback, on the rebound, at long last. All of these titles that I mentioned, these powerhouses, the bricks that built survival horror. It felt like at long last the entire genre was firing on all cylinders. Which makes the news of Alice Asylum's foreclosure so soon after its campaign commencement so utterly heartbreaking. To me, it was the icing on the cake that, with all these heavy hitters heading our way, one announcement after another, that an admittedly smaller IP like McGee's Alice was officially along for the ride. Anything seemed possible after that. Just look at what we had gotten in the years since RE2 Remake and the return of the Doom games to prominence. A remaster of the medieval game, that Tim Burton inspired dark fantasy title. The Alan Wake remaster. Hell, look at what released last month. The RE4 remake, the same remake that has left Capcom in a state of blue balls since RE7. They've at long last creamed their pants to be able to deliver. I mean, forget for a second the horizon of remakes on the way and feast your eyes on the hope of what could come. The Embracer Group, a media holding company, implored the Legacy of Kain fans, what would you like to see in a revival? So you know that game is going to see a comeback. So make that another beloved dark fantasy IP from the past. Man, like I remember playing those games, and it was popular. It had a fan base. So it was like what the hell? I don't even think that there's been a Legacy of Kain game on consoles since, I know there were at least 2 failed reboots. But my God, we're in the PS5 era now. We're in the Xbox Series X, the 4th edition of Microsoft console. I don't think that, and mind you, I own an Xbox One. I have a 360. I don't think there's been a Legacy of Kain game to come out on these consoles in decades. Decades. That's almost plural. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that is plural because it's almost been 20 years since the 360 even came out, and nothing. And Legacy of Kain, that ain't no slouch. That's got like what, 5 proper games in the franchise. So the fact that that's coming out, the fact that somebody bought it and understands the value behind it, understands that there's a fan base, and like the fact that they reached out to the fans is incredible to me. So, with a third Alice game in the works, I at least was gullible enough to think maybe, just maybe, the final 2 pieces of the puzzle are going to come together. A Parasite Eve and a Dino Crisis renewal was at long last possible. Maybe. And hell, if we're on the subject of survival horror triumphant returns from the doldrums of the EA library, or dungeon depending on how you look at it, didn't this year kick off with the return of Dead Space? That restoration alone made me optimistic about Asylum's prospects. If Electronic Arts could acknowledge the value in that series, it had to be a done deal that American McGee's closing chapter would see the light of day, right? Right? I guess now would be a good time to acknowledge the elephant in the room and address the evil empire. Oh, Electronic Arts. While you don't need me to tell you that EA has, or was, voted the worst company in America, what you do need me to tell you is not only were they the first corporation ever to receive that illustrious accolade, but also the first to win that title twice in consecutive years. 10 years ago, this year. I genuinely struggle to find a comparable turn of events that has transpired in either gaming or film in either horror or more mainstream action films. The closest I can think of is the Weinstein's vice grip on the Hellraiser IP. It's like they didn't want to invest in a worthwhile script or story. They would only churn out a paint-by-numbers sequel to retain the rights to something with name brand recognition. Speaking of, the dismissive tone in the wording of EA's response tells the whole story. They try to save face with a mention of... Excuse me. They try to save face with a mention of how important this is to their library, despite their lacking investment in over a decade of the Alice IP. And, like, just the way that they phrased it, this isn't an investor meeting. We're not one of the members of your town hall. This is such a stock standard correspondence that reads more like a scripted reply than actually addressing the mission objective, the crowd-funded support, or the passionate fan base. And no state of the franchise, no acknowledgement of its admirers, just an indifferent mechanical rejection where, once you bypass the boardroom jargon and general apathy, amounts to a half-hearted, nah, we're good. I might as well read their corporate speak here. Okay, so, what do we have? Give me a second. So... Quote, on the question of funding, EA has ultimately decided to pass on the project based on an internal analysis of the IP, market conditions, and details of the production proposal, McG announced via Patreon. On the question of licensing, they replied, Alice is an important part of EA's overall game catalog, and selling or licensing it isn't something they're prepared to do right now. At this point, they have exhausted every option for getting a new Alice game made. That last part is in reference to McG's efforts. I'm honestly surprised that EA didn't wish American McG well in his future endeavors. Honestly, the fact that they won't even license the IP is what's particularly repugnant. Look, if you've been a fan of anything over the years, pick your poison. Games, comics, TV shows, pro wrestling, etc. You know that these studios ain't just gonna bend to your will just because you want them to. Hell, they go so far as to mock their own fan base nowadays. You're a racist if you don't like the new Ariel movie. You're toxic if you support the Snyder Cut or say that The Last Jedi isn't canon. Jeez, look at the Scream movies. That franchise has released 2 back-to-back movies in the last year, railing on its own core audience. But, on the other hand, supply and demand, bro. Like, seriously, how does this even need to be explained? How is it that... why is it that a channel such as me even has to go into such exhaustive detail on this? Look, Universal Studios recently put the kibosh on a fan-made Jurassic Park game by the name of Jurassic Park Operations that was going to actually make it a survival horror title. And those sons of bitches had the nerve to say that the game would have interfered with their creative vision of the franchise. What? Have you even seen those movies? Creative? Vision, you say? Everyone's favorite punching bag Capcom even canceled not 1, but 2 fan-made remakes just when they had nearly wrapped development. Can you imagine that? You invest all this time into passionately making something that you're genuinely interested in, that you know fans want to see, something that has the backing of fans, of your creative team. You're almost done. All this hard work is finally, and look, I don't know what the payment structure is there, but those things can be negotiated. So what does Capcom decide to do? Right when development is about to wrap, they cancel the remakes of the original and Code Veronica. And at a time where even post-pandemic and most likely pre-recession, you gotta know that these companies are hurting for both cash and customer goodwill, but nah, it'll be fine. Honestly, what more can these companies ask for to profit off of work that they themselves don't even have to do? It's just a reminder of the Grand Canyon size difference between these companies and their what they consider consumers, or the fan base in layman's terms. I mean, damn, I genuinely I stagger for answers because I genuinely wonder, don't you people want your IPs, your franchises, your series to remain in the public consciousness? Like, aren't you happy that people give enough of a damn that they're dedicating their time, their energy, their resources, their money to make these fan-made games? Like, do you just want apathy? Because that's basically, I mean, that's obviously what you maintain. That's your company policy, to have apathy towards the fans and the gaming titles that you look at as property. It's unfathomable. And as far as American McG, the fact that he's been there before and crafted 2 games in the Alice series and is now barred from the gates of Wonderland, man, that's gotta hurt something fierce. That just has to eat at the man. And think about it. Quote, "To have loved and lost is better than to never have loved before." Yeah, that phrase kind of comes into question when you yearn and ache for that feeling again, the exhilaration and the satisfaction with the work you've done, and now you're denied resolution or return. That's got to be a fate truly dismal to endure. I mean, really put yourself in this guy's shoes. He's been there before, and I have no doubt that he's had to deal with, empty suits and gatekeepers and all that. But to have visited this franchise twice before, and I gotta believe as a creator, like there were things left on the cutting room floor. There were ideas that maybe he ran out of money and couldn't have done with Alice Madness Returns or the original Alice game. And I new ideas of his own. He probably wants to leverage new gaming hardware, flex his muscles with what he's learned as a creator with new gaming software. And he's been there twice before, so now he has more resources at his disposal. Maybe the technology of what he wanted to do with either game just wasn't available back then, and now it is. And now he's barred from the gates of Eden. This news is nothing short of a gut punch to expectations and encouragement, a slap in the face to its creator and the design team, and a rude reminder to the fans how originality and talent can be so effortlessly snuffed out. It's nothing short of harrowing to consider how many years American McG and his team pledged to this passion piece, that the campaign didn't even last 2 months, and it was all undone by Electronic Arts in a matter of moments. Look, We've all worked office jobs in an open space layout without privacy. The dress code can be monotonous. Your ideas are rejected at the board meetings. Your hard work is ignored by the time of bonuses. However, the tasks that we complete are in service of a corporate agenda. The entertainment world is predicated on innovation and talent. At least it should be. So, to abruptly realize that the business of imagination can be equally, if not more creatively stifling, is discouraging to say the least. The thought that the premise of escapism can be restrictive or as restrictive as a three-walled cubicle is demoralizing. And I fear that's what American McG has gone through and is going through now. How ironic that his third entry was called Asylum, because an asylum is the last place anyone would want to be. Except for him. Except for his fans. It's tragic that Wonderland is a fairy tale land of imagination to visit because it is now an Imagineer that is restricted access. Perchance to dream. American McG, he was willing to share what he had to offer from the tree of knowledge. It was electronic arts that poisoned the wellspring and turned his dream into forbidden fruit. If Alice Asylum was going to fail, it should have been on its own merits, not dying before ever having the chance to draw breath. And I'm afraid the news gets worse. Quote, Alice Asylum is at an end. The decision has reportedly encouraged McG to officially lay down his development tools and exit the industry entirely. For my part, I have also reached an endpoint with Alice and with game production in general, McG announced. I have no other ideas or energy left to apply toward a new Alice game made. Nor do I have any interest in pursuing new game ideas within the context of the current environment of game development. God. McG has further confirmed that he has no control over the Alice IP as it is owned solely by EA. Any decision to make a sequel or continue the series would rely on support from the company, and for now, it appears that avenue is closed. It's often said that when one door closes, another opens. Trite but true. And I hope that for all of you, this closure will bring life to other adventures and dreams, McG said. To conclude the story of Alice Asylum and the years-long journey to bring the game to life. For now, the franchise will continue to lay dormant, with the remaining Asylum design Bibles serving as a reminder of what could have been. This is probably the worst part of this news. It's disappointing enough that we're not getting a third Alice game. That sucks, and no one will question that. But EA's casual dismissal of the project killed this man's passion to ever pursue design again. That right there is a whole other level of despair. And honestly, who can blame him? The politics, the red tape, the hoops to jump through. He probably just figured, the hell with it. I've done my time. I've done my bid for King and Country. I don't need this heartache or the headaches. Again, I realize that the Alice games are smaller by comparison to franchises like Dead Space or games like System Shock, And let's be honest, survival horror, and especially gaming, will continue. The show must go on. However, the landscape and the industry is a lesser place without creative minds like his. And EA killed more than just his campaign. They killed his will to create. With the cancellation of Alice, Asylum, and McGee's seeming retirement from game design, goes with it unrealized future projects he conceptualized. I'm referring to, in case you didn't know, he had ideas and projects for American McGee's Oz, Oz Zombies, Oz Adventures. He never gave up on these ideas for that franchise. We heard word last February, of the Alice TV series, which hasn't had any news of forward momentum in the year that it's been announced. You know, I had really hoped that with Asylum getting off the ground, that the momentum would snowball into the Alice TV show and a return and realization of one of his Oz projects. While we do get adaptations from survival horror like The Last of Us currently on HBO Max, we're getting that crappy Five Nights at Freddy's from that crappy studio Blumhouse, I believe in October this year. They need something to fill in the gap of their Halloween nosedive. It's crazy to me that, like, people want to make those adaptations and they don't get it. I mean, I'm sure that there are headaches, as there are with any art form that is attempted, and it does, you know, it could be an original idea. It doesn't have to be an adaptation. It's just crazy to me that, you know, these adaptations, The Last of Us and Five Nights at Freddy's, I imagine that they don't get any pushback, right? They don't have the heartache that's attached with them, much like is often the case with somebody who wants to make something out of an existing established IP that they love and that has a dedicated fan base. Well, this stream isn't all doom and gloom. If we are talking about adaptations to cult classics, at least we have Killer Clowns from Outer Space to look forward to. In terms of the handlers of other IPs, it's frustrating to me that others have failed upwards with their contributions to established franchises. Prime suspects and repeat offenders include Guillermo del Toro and Alex Kurtzman. Let's start with del Toro. Oh, God. His list of charges include Cabinet of Curiosities, At the Mountains of Madness, Pinocchio, Frankenstein. I just heard about a new one, a fantasy novel that he's adapting, the Buried Giant, going to Netflix. You know, for an alleged auteur, he sure does rely solely on other people's work to remain working. And never forget, this guy was poison when it came to survival horror games. Insane, Silent Hills. There was some other Lovecraft game that he was attached to, and by the time he had something that a video game that he was involved with actually got released, we got Death Stranding. Think about that one. Thank God this revival of Silent Hill is coming to the fore. I mean, to the point that we're getting a plethora of games, Silent Hill 2 remake, and not only a film, but a film written and directed by the original film's writer and director, who the success of the first film is, you know, full credit to Christoph Gans. But nobody acknowledges that we dodged a bullet by Silent Hills with Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro not releasing. The fact that Guillermo del Toro has had so many problems with Lovecraft adaptations and video games, that's that rare example where that's a good thing, because he's not talented. And then there's Alex Kurtzman. Dear Lord, listen to this rap sheet. Transformers, Amazing Spider-Man, The Mummy 2017, Star Trek Diversity, and that canceled Clarice show. I'll never forget the Entertainment Weekly article that utterly flayed this man alive before they filleted his no-talent ass. Clarice's other co-creator is Alex Kurtzman, a practiced IP hack known for Transformers, various Star Treks, a failed Mummy, and the worst Spider-Man. That's a lot of money made off other people's originality. Oof. Can't we institute some kind of limit on this stuff? Like, maybe a person can only work in 4 pre-existing universes per decade? His participation makes Clarice feel even more like a dastardly act of franchise capitalism. I'd believe you if you told me Kurtzman was planning a Buffalo Bill prequel series or a throwback procedure where Clarice Starling's dad solves 60s crime. Now, that's a burn the likes that only the Mind's Eye could have doled out, and is definitely Inkarnate approved. Back to business. Fate is not without a sense of irony. That these talentless hacks can flop so very hard and so very often, and how they still worm their way into other projects, and especially other popular series, is anyone's guess. And yet someone like American McG must sing for his supper. It was my aforementioned video, Survival Horror Remorse, where I mentioned my bewilderment over Capcom's stupidity to fail to resurrect the Dino Crisis games in the face of the revival of the Jurassic World trilogy. They had 7 years to capitalize on their success and billion-dollar box office, and those movies objectively sucked. I mention that because, considering the state of fantasy where you get House of the Dragon, Amazon's The Rings of Power, and a Hogwarts game, all within the last year, I'd hasten to remind you, is EA really that tone deaf, that blind, and out of touch not to recognize that there is a market for fantasy, B, a franchise within their own grubby mitts that they can leverage, and C, a designer with a fan-supported campaign and a design bible and a creative team ready, willing, and able to push this project. The ignominy. Sorry. The ignominy on display is a spectacle to behold. It's just all bad timing. And here's the part of the video where I admittedly get selfish. Either at the end of this month or the beginning of next month, I had planned on summarizing my highlights of the design bible. 414 pages is a lot to digest, so I wanted to give a synopsis to outline and underline key factors of the game, like plot and boss battles, but also any design elements that caught my eye, that I felt showed the innovations that leveraged current-gen hardware or improved gameplay from the previous entries, or otherwise would serve to entice players enough to support the project. In addition to the Alice Madness Returns Scream stream that I was playing all month, someone had adapted a dark version of its sibling fantasy rival. Celebrating its 20th anniversary, McFarlane's Toys had not only been, had not only designed horrific versions of the characters up from The Wizard of Oz, but someone went through the trouble of crafting a dark iteration of the original story, or perhaps simply a retelling of the storybook classic, more in line with its more sinister tone. Therefore, a reading of the Twisted Land of Oz chapters served as a lead-in for the gameplay of Alice Madness Returns. Not just that, but as a closer, as a closer to the Easter Feaster, I had planned a watch party of Return to Oz to close out the month. I mention this because in addition to my rundown of the Design Bible, I was planning an addendum video discussing the hope that's in store for fans of both series. Not only do we have horror renditions of these fairy tales with the McGee's 2 Wonderland games and the Twisted Land of Oz, but we were now getting Alice, Asylum, and the quietly held secret of the indie film Gale as well. A project seemingly appearing out of nowhere with genuine craftsmanship, atmosphere, and clever direction. What a time to be alive, I thought. Everything seemed to be falling into place. But again, more bad timing. Look, I get the news. The news of the cancellation is much bigger than a bullet point for one of my videos. But I'm just saying, it was great that both franchises were moving forward within the genre of dark fantasy where they belong. When you take this news in totality, with the points that I've raised, the survival horror remakes that have released, the projects to come, the revivals to hope for, the momentum of announcements and timetable of reboots, the work in the Design Bible, and the promise of crowdfunding, the continuance of the fantasy twins from faraway lands, Oz and Wonderland enduring on and venturing forward, the news of the cancellation is discouraging to say the least. It also would have been great to have a nice decade delayed palate cleanser of what most people would consider the most memorable, or at least the most noteworthy additions in recent memory in either franchise. I'm talking about Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland sequels and Sam Raimi's Oz the Great and Powerful. Oh my God. I was very much looking forward to Alice Asylum and the Gale Stay Away from Oz film, saving us from that wretched memory. So I hope no one listening takes my words or this video as an exploitive means for me to name drop my own content or to prop up my channel. In fact, my intention with this part of the video is actually the reverse. In preparation of this broadcast, I took the liberty of cataloging the videos and channels that I follow that dedicated deep dive vlogs of the Alice video games. Specifically, I'm referring to Ragnarok's A Journey Through Alice Madness Returns, G-Man Lives, American McGee's Alice, the best game no one remembers, and Super Horror Bro, the story of Alice Madness Returns explained. This following comparison might sound a bit out of place, but I ask that you stick with me. 9 years ago, when the WWE ended The Undertaker's undefeated WrestleMania streak that lasted nearly a quarter of a century, it took the wind right out of the sails of the live event crowd, the locker room, and the greater wrestling fan base. I'm paraphrasing when Former pro wrestling writer Jim Cornette famously said, "You can capitalize on people's enjoyment. You can bank on people's hatred. But you can't make money off sadness." I believe that's the closest I can get to even remotely classifying my state of mind when it comes to this unfortunate development regarding Alice Asylum. Believe me, I wish the solution lay within me seething over this disappointment. I'd happily spend the next 3 months raging up a storm, the likes of which we only see over social media when someone uses the wrong pronouns. But instead of useful ire, all we're left with is futile sorrow. I, for one, still fully intend on reading the Design Bible in its entirety, and I highly recommend that you do as well. It's the least that I can do, and too much has been invested in those pages to let them go to waste. I don't believe that this hard work should go astray, even if its gatekeepers feel otherwise. Now, you might respond simply, what's the use in reading through the blueprint of a game that was canceled? Which, on the one hand, is totally understandable. It would just serve as a reminder of what could have been. However, on the other hand, as small of a consolation as this would sound, what would have set the landscape ablaze can at least persist as an ember of what the bigger portrait might have been. At least the spirit can live on through Reddit discussions, chat rooms, conversations, fan fiction, artwork. I was reading before, either through the Reddit of Alice Asylum or Alice Madness Returns, someone was speaking about how to boycott EA, which I wouldn't be opposed to. They were referencing how they have broken the silent contract between company and consumer, between supply and demand, and they were 100% right. And again, I wish there was a solution to undo all of this, to just wind the clock back and somehow turn the tables. But I mean, even American McG has he's just opted to walk away from this. And again, I say that not to mock him or not to finger wag. So I don't want to end this video plugging my socials. No catchy outro. This isn't the moment for you to crush that like button or hit the notification bell. Despite the somber tone of this video, I do hope it gives all who listen to it an outlet to similarly vent their frustrations and attain some measure of closure. By all means, save your appeals to action for the aforementioned dedicated videos in order to keep the memory of Alice Returns alive. And especially send your well wishes to American McG after what he's been through, the week that he's had, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. He's been on an emotional roller coaster. That man could use some encouragement. So, I've spoken on this subject for about an hour. I think that I've gotten everything that I wanted to off my chest. Check out the video suggestions I mentioned. Please read through the Design Bible. It's a free download and linked in the description of this video. And R.I.P. Alice Asylum.